Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X research and professional physicist. And today I'd like to bring to you another one of my articles. This one's entitled Planet X in Our Skies, Water and Vortices. Now, figure 1 below shows a web camera photograph showing a spherical object in the sky enveloped in cloud. The object is clearly inside the Earth's atmosphere and is thus a Planet X object. And from its size, which is small, it is most likely a small moon core. As I have shown in previous articles, Planet X objects or Planet X system stellar cores in the Earth's atmosphere are always enveloped in a cloud envelope made of tiny water droplets. And you may look at Article 570 entitled Locating Planet X. So here you are, you can clearly see there's an object there, and it seems to be enveloped in a cloud. And the smallest of these objects seem to be about 250 feet in diameter. And for more details on that, you may look at Article 547 entitled Planet X Covered Up by the Moon Hologram in the Earth's Atmosphere. Now, the water making up a Planet X object's cloud envelope is Planet X debris, as it used to be a part of the celestial objects, stars, planets, and moons, which died and turned into a dead core surrounded by a debris field. So the water, like all the rest of the material, including the core, severely depleted in gravitational photon energy, or the energy which is in the form of light and that exists within particles. When these objects first enter the Earth's atmosphere, the water in their cloud envelope starts exchanging electrons with the Earth's atmosphere and thus starts to gain photon energy, which it passes on to the object. Since water will tend to equalize its gravitational energy to its environment, the cloud at the bottom of the cloud envelope gains more energy than the top, which is why clouds are usually darker at the bottom. Eventually, enough of the cloud has gained enough energy to form a cloud vortex from the bottom of the object, which may eventually connect to the surface. The vortex, once it reaches the ground level, pulls material upwards along the rotating vortex. If the cloud vortex is over water, it pulls water upwards towards the surface of the stellar core. And this is what you see happening here. You can see it's cloud water up to a point, and then you can see that it's clear water. And clear water comes from the ocean. It's being pulled up along the vortex. So liquid water is transported upwards by this water spout. Water from the surface is denser and thus transparent, whilst the Planet X water forming the cloud is not transparent. It looks opaque white or some other color depending on whether it absorbs light or not. Some clouds emit light and are thus luminescent. And this occurs when electrons settling in water molecule energy levels have too much energy and must release some in the form of visible light photons. Now, as I detailed in Article 569 entitled Effect of Planet X Objects as Large as the Sun on the Earth Energy Levels, matter only interacts with matter at a comparable energy level, which is determined by its electric potential and thus the number of protons per unit volume in it. In other words, by its proton density. Larger objects have higher proton densities and are thus at higher energy levels. This results in smaller objects having comparable energy to matter in the Earth's atmosphere and thus interacting with the atmosphere, whereas larger objects are at higher energy levels and interact with plasma inside the body of the Earth. But since they all have water cloud envelopes, they are all able to interact with water, which indicates that water must be able to exist at vastly different densities and states. This is most likely why water has been found deep inside the Earth. This water would be much hotter and denser than water on the surface and thus be in a different state. We may call it magma water state. Water can also exist in the gaseous state in the Earth's atmosphere, but it will then be at a low energy. The gravitational energy that was originally in the water, having been used to break the bonds and thus cause a decrease in its electric potential and therefore its energy level. Water in the cloud envelopes of Planet X objects is in the liquid state, but separated into tiny droplets, which means that its overall density is low, but the density in each droplet is high. This means that this water exists in two different states. At the correct overall low density, which is associated with low initial gravitational energy, which is the same as the stellar cores, but the droplets are at the correct high density, which is associated with the stellar core's electric potential or energy level. Because water adapts to its environment inside the Earth's atmosphere, it gains gravitational energy, causing its gravitational potential to increase and the water droplets to come closer to each other, i.e. the cloud's overall density increases. This tends to occur at the bottom of the cloud where the Earth's gravitational potential is higher. Once the gravitational potential is higher than the electric potential jumps to the next electric potential or energy level, as it can only have discrete values. In other words, water has quantized electric potential. It only varies in steps. You can only move from one step to a higher step or to a lower step, but you cannot move to a values in between. So that means, but the gravitational potential varies continuously in water. So you can have any values in between any other values. There is always an infinite number of possibilities. When the water droplets increase the electric potential by one step, it is like a planet moving to a lower orbit. It moves at a higher speed, which is associated to that orbit. That starts the formation of a vortex at the bottom of the cloud. And this illustrates how water droplets and how they change the energy levels. So this would be the water droplets initially. Small water droplets with water molecules inside them, several water molecules, and they separated by a certain distance from each other. So this would be the initial gravitational and electric potential. You can see the same droplets, same size, but now they're closer together. And that means that the gravitational potential has increased. But this distance can vary by any amount. So it means that the gravitational potential varies continuously. It has any number of possibilities we can think of, just like the distance between the droplets. But in this case, the gravitational potential of the cloud would have increased because the droplets are now closer together. Whilst here, what happened was the gravitational potential increased to the point that the electric potential had to jump to a higher level. And when that happened, the bonds between the molecules in the water increased in strength. And that led to surface tension, which is the tension that keeps a droplet together, to increase so that they merged into larger droplets. So that means that the electric potential and therefore its energy level suddenly increased to the next level. And that has to do with the strength of the bonds between the electrons. So that's why it's to do with the electric potential. Now, cloud vortices come in different sizes. The size of a vortex is associated to the size of the stellar core the cloud is an envelope of. This is clear from the fact that size of water vortices generated in a large amount of water draining through a hole, such as the hole at the bottom of the kitchen sink, is dependent on the size of the hole. And since the hole acts as a source of gravity, i.e., it acts like a massive object, so that means that we expect larger objects to create larger vortices. And you can see here, this is a large vortex, this is a small vortex in terms of radii or width. So this depends on the size of the Planet X object generating them. So we have a large object there, and we have a small object here. These clouds are usually dark at the bottom because water at the bottom of the vortex has higher gravitational energy and is therefore denser. You can definitely see that it looks darker here than up there. So these clouds, as I said, are usually dark at the bottom. And so that means that the water droplets are closer together at the bottom because the water at the bottom has gained more gravitational energy. So the largest vortices also seem to rotate slowly and the smallest much faster. So these large vortices rotate slowly, and these ones, and that's why tornadoes produce these extreme high winds, rotate much faster. And on the right, what we have is surface water, which joins the cloud vortex and spirals into it. You can clearly see the spiraling water on the surface of the ocean spiraling in. And it actually creates regions of lower than normal ocean level. You can see the ocean level has dropped here, whilst it's higher there. And it's actually varying. It's higher there, and it decreases as it spirals in. And then this one is even lower, and that shows that there are different energy levels. So the ocean water, as it makes contact with vortex water, changes its energy level to a higher level, which causes the ocean level to drop. So the water here is at a higher energy level than the water there. Now, we can also see that larger objects should give rise to larger vortices in terms of energy levels or orbits generated by an object of a certain size. Larger objects have larger electric potentials and will thus have larger energy levels or allowed orbits, because the orbits will just be further apart, with the first orbit having a much larger radius than the first orbit for a small object. This is why stars like the sun have much larger orbits than atoms, and that is because the sun is much larger, so its energy levels are much further apart. Now, the fact that vortices with small radii rotate faster suggests that they are orbits. As I said, the water droplets are in orbit around the point at the center of the orbit. In the solar system, the inner planets move much faster than the outer planets. For example, Mercury's orbital radius is 0.387 AU, and its orbital period is 88 days. So its orbital speed would be the orbital radius divided by the orbital period, and that gives us 0.0044 AU astronomical units per day, whilst Earth has an orbital radius of 1 AU and a period of 365 days. So its orbital period is 0.0027 AU per day. So it's much lower. There it starts with a 4, and here it starts with 2. So it's much less. And of course, Earth is much further from the Sun than Mercury. So thus, the larger the orbital radius, the slower the speed. In other words, water droplets orbiting in a cloud vortex or orbiting the central point in a vortex. The fact that they do not occupy the central region shows that this is not an allowed region, i.e. the energy level associated with an orbit in that region is not allowed. Just like there are not allowed energy levels in atoms where no electron can be found, and just like there will be certain orbital distances in a planetary system where no planets will be found. And you may look at Article 558 entitled Astronomical Quantum Mechanics, Gravitational Potential, and Orbitals. So that shows that because the orbit here, because this is a much wider vortex, so it's a much larger orbit, will cause the water molecules, the water droplets, to move at a much slower speed than the water molecules in this vortex, because this is a much smaller orbit, just like Mercury orbits at a much higher speed than Earth does because its orbit is so much smaller. Now here what we have is a cloud or water vortex. And this diagram actually illustrates how it forms. So what we have here is a cloud. And it's lighter on the top than on the bottom, because on the top part does not have the same gravitational energy as the one at the bottom. So this would be the very bottom of a cloud before it starts forming a vortex. Because as the gravitational energy keeps increasing, eventually, and this V is 6, is the electric potential of the object and therefore its cloud envelope. The gravitational energy changes. So the gravitational energy of the cloud here in this region is higher than there. And it changes continuously. So as we move down, it increases continuously. And that means the water droplets are just closer and closer together. But then you get to the point where the gravitational energy gets to VG5. Whilst the electric potential is VE6. It's one level, it's one level higher, but that means that it's lower in energy, because the energy increases as we move downwards towards the surface. So VG3 is higher than VG7 in energy. So when the gravitational energy gets up to VG5, that's a level higher than the associated level, which would be for here would be VE5. So, but these can only change in steps. And now suddenly you have water that is higher in gravitational energy than it is in electrical energy or electric potential. So what happened is it has to change. So this level has to change to a higher level, but it can only change in steps. So it immediately changes to VE5. And when it does, it immediately changes to a higher orbit, which means it's got to now start rotating and moving in that orbit. It now has a speed associated with it. And so it suddenly jumps, and the water that is at that energy level now starts rotating around this edge here. And as it moves down because it is still increasing in gravitational energy. It's still absorbing gravitational energy from the atmosphere, so it's still increasing its gravitational energy. And then it gets to the point where it's VG4. Again, it's got to jump to another electric potential level. So it keeps on going into the next orbit and the next and the next until it reaches the surface, where it would then connect with the water that is at the surface. So a cloud over water vortex, which is what we see here, it has gravitational and electric potential levels which increase downwards. Gravitational energy of water changes continuously, but electric potential can only have discrete values. Once the gravitational potential is higher than the electric potential of the stellar core, and is higher than all the water in the cloud, then the water at the higher gravitational potential changes to the next higher energy level, which causes it to go into orbit about a central point at the level it has reached. And you can see the central point here. The central point is in line with the center of the stellar core. So this would be in line with the center of the stellar core, be up here somewhere, and the center of the Earth. So this line connects the center of the stellar core with the center of the Earth. The orbital direction is determined by the local magnetic field, as the circular motion creates a magnetic field which will then anti-align with the local magnetic field. So if the local magnetic field is oriented downwards, which is what we would expect in the northern hemisphere, the rotation will be as shown here, and that's anti-clockwise. So we will get an anti-clockwise rotating vortex then. And the size, as I mentioned before, the size of the radius, that has to do with the initial size of the object, and therefore this energy level. For this particular object is VE6. For a larger object, it would be different. But the distance and the size of the orbit is dependent on the size of the object. So in conclusion, Planet X system stellar cores surrounded in their cloud envelopes produce cloud vortices in the Earth's atmosphere, which provide a bridge between the stellar core and the Earth and allows them to absorb energy and matter from the Earth. The formation and shape of the vortices can be understood in terms of energy levels and associated orbits, as well as from the way that water as a substance is able to do what other substances cannot. It can continuously change its gravitational potential by varying the distance between droplets of water, whilst changing its electric potential in a step or quantized way. And these are the references. This is Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X physicist. Thank you for watching.